Hi, I'm Easleen. My mother staged a prayer circle about being betrayed by her daughter, while secretly forging my signature to steal my house. My father drained my savings account. And my sister? She filmed inside my bedroom while I was away, used it for her social media brand about family pain. They kicked me out of my own home, then rewrote the story to make themselves the victims. They told the world I abandoned them. But what if I told you they planned every step, long before I ever said no? What else would a family do to make you look like the villain, just to keep the lie alive? There's a certain stillness to the late afternoon light in San Diego. It settles in soft, gold-tinted layers across everything, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I was returning to peace. 4 days in Palm Springs, back-to-back consultations and color boards, had left me physically tired but mentally reset. I wanted nothing more than to step inside, take off my shoes, and sink into the quiet hum of my own space. But the first thing I saw wasn't the front door. It was my suitcase, sitting upright on the porch, like a guest that had overstayed its welcome. The one I hadn't taken with me. Next to it was a folded set of bed linens I recognized immediately. Mine. Neatly stacked, absurdly polite in presentation, as if whoever placed them there thought they were doing me a favor. I frowned. My keys jingled faintly as I reached the door. I pressed one into the lock, twisted. Nothing. Tried another. Still nothing. The locks had been changed. For a few seconds, I just stood there, keys in one hand, bag in the other, blinking at the brass doorknob like it would suddenly remember who I was. Then the door creaked open. Veronica! My mother's face appeared behind the screen, all powdered poise and stiff lips. Her hair was set, her blouse ironed, like she'd dressed for a performance. She looked at me the way someone might look at a persistent telemarketer. "You've made your choices," she said calmly. "It's time we made ours." Behind her, my father stood motionless near the hallway, his arms crossed, his eyes elsewhere. And then there was Callista, my sister, perched on the staircase with a glass of wine, watching me like this was theater. Her lips curled upward just slightly, enough to let me know she wasn't surprised. This had been coordinated. I didn't speak right away. I just took a breath. Deep, slow, measured. "You changed the locks?" "We needed to," my mother said, "for the energy of the house. It's been very negative lately." That was when it clicked. Not just the betrayal, but the choreography of it. The quiet removal, the placement of my things outside like trash day came early. "I bought this house," I said. Veronica tilted her head. "We know, and we're grateful. But at some point, gratitude doesn't mean subjugation." I didn't have the capacity to argue. Not because I wasn't angry, I was. But because anger requires clarity, and I was still trying to catch up to what the hell had just happened. I turned without another word, dragged my suitcase down the steps, and got in my car. I drove on autopilot, a loop of blank spaces filling my mind. No music, no phone calls, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional flick of my blinker. I ended up at a diner I used to visit in college, somewhere safe and nameless. I slid into a booth, ordered a coffee I didn't want, and stared out the window while the sky faded into navy. That's when Aunt Marla showed up. I didn't see her walk in, but I heard her. She stormed toward me, with a crumpled sheet of paper clutched in one hand. "Are you out of your damn mind?" She barked loud enough for the entire diner to pause. "You kicked your own parents out? After everything they've done for you?" She slapped the paper onto the table. A printed Facebook post. Familiar words in unfamiliar font. I stared down at it. A photo of my parents sitting on a park bench, looking pitiful and hollow. The caption read, "We raised her with love. She threw us to the streets." 742 shares. Hundreds of comments. People I hadn't seen since childhood had commented with things like, "So sad, these kids today," or "I always knew she was cold." A waitress hovered nearby. I gave her a look, and she slowly stepped away. Marla was still standing, breathing hard. I didn't move, didn't flinch. It's not what they post online, I said quietly. It's what they make people believe that kills you. Marla opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at me. Not like family, not even like someone she recognized, just confused, hurt, like I had murdered a version of me she had constructed in her head. She walked out without another word. I finished my untouched coffee, paid in cash, and left. Sitting in my car outside, I opened Facebook. My face stared back at me, cropped and angled just right to look severe, heartless. The caption made me sound like a villain in a suburban tragedy. I scrolled through the comments. Someone had written, "You can't raise a snake and expect loyalty." Someone else posted, "Some kids are just born broken." And then, silence. I stared at the screen until the text blurred. And that's the moment I realized. I hadn't just been evicted from my home. I'd been evicted from my own story. I woke up to the kind of silence that doesn't comfort. It accuses. The light filtering through the blinds was too bright, too still. It didn't belong to any space I called home. I was in Dana's guest room, the one she never used except when her sister visited from Portland. Last night, I couldn't bring myself to check into a hotel. Something about lining up at a front desk, repeating my name with a fake smile, felt like it would make everything real too fast. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I hesitated before reaching for it, my stomach already tight. 40 missed calls, 123 messages. I opened Facebook, foolishly hoping maybe I was overthinking. But there it was, pinned to the top of my feed, shared by a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. A photo of me at age 7, kneeling in front of a Christmas tree, wrapped in a red sweater my mother had knitted. The caption read, "She had everything, now we have nothing." Underneath, hundreds of likes, shares climbing by the second. Comment after comment flooding in, some pitiful, some angry, most from people I barely remembered, but who apparently remembered enough of me to judge. In the age of social media, character assassination is just a click away. I whispered that to myself, not like it was a revelation, but like a reminder that this was no longer just about being kicked out. This was war, and they were using nostalgia as ammunition. The comments weren't subtle. "She always acted like she was better than the rest of us." "Ungrateful brat. I hope karma visits soon." "I remember when she cried over a scraped knee. Now she makes her parents cry." Even people I knew to be decent once had left sad emojis, quiet nods of agreement, or just silence. I kept scrolling, knowing I shouldn't, knowing each line was another paper cut. Somewhere in that spiral of disbelief and boiling shame, I stopped feeling like I was scrolling through a timeline. It felt more like I was walking through a hallway full of portraits where someone had spray-painted liar and traitor across every frame of my face. My eyes burned. I didn't cry. Not yet. Not when crying felt like a privilege I couldn't afford. I built my life on silence. But now, silence is what's destroying me. Later that morning, while sipping lukewarm coffee that Dana had left on the counter, my inbox pinged. The subject line was simple. "Project termination notice, Coastal Revisions Firm." I opened it. "Dear Isleen, we regret to inform you that due to the recent online controversy involving your family, we must withdraw from our current contract. We pride ourselves on promoting family values, and this situation, while personal, does not align with our brand identity." Attached was a screenshot. My childhood photo again, this time with my adult face circled in red. The caption was enlarged, bolded. They had done more than cut me from their lives. They had poisoned the water I drank from. My career wasn't just shaken, it was bleeding out. For a while, I sat at the edge of the guest bed, staring at the floor, listening to the hum of Dana's fridge down the hall. What do you do when the ground beneath your name starts to rot? I opened my laptop. Fingers hovered over the keys. I began drafting a post of my own. Something calm, rational. Something that laid out the facts without bitterness. I even typed out an opening line. I've stayed silent out of respect, but I can no longer let a lie live longer than my truth. I paused. Reread the line from their post again. We don't want money, we just wanted love. And there it was. The weapon. A lie that sounded like a lullaby. What do you say to a lie that sounds kinder than your truth? I closed the draft, stood up, walked to the mirror above the dresser, and stared at the reflection staring back. Tired eyes. Tense jaw. Not the face of a villain, not the face of a monster, but not the same face that left Palm Springs 4 days ago either. I walked back to the desk and closed the laptop. The screen went black, and for a moment, I saw my own silhouette in its reflection. Vague, shaded, but still there. They declared war with a cropped photo. I'll respond with the full picture. Because if they want a narrative, I'll give them the truth, frame by frame. Sunday afternoons used to be my reset time. Laundry humming in the background, grocery lists half written, my inbox ignored on purpose. Now I sat cross-legged in Dana's rental studio, blinds drawn against the spring glare, the laptop screen casting a pale blue light across my face. I wasn't scrolling anymore. That phase passed sometime between the 14th text from a childhood friend saying, I just don't know what to believe, and the moment my former art professor unfollowed me. Now I was tracking the timestamps. It clicked suddenly, harshly. The photo they'd used in the viral post of my bedroom was taken from inside the room. A detail so subtle it had slipped past my exhausted brain until now. The way the window light hit my nightstand, the tilt of the angle. Only someone with access could have taken it. There's telling your side of the story, I muttered, opening my browser. And then there's recording theirs without them knowing. 2 years ago, I installed a discrete camera system in the house. I traveled so much for work, it made sense at the time. Small, cloud-connected, motion-activated. I hadn't thought about it in months. My login credentials still worked. I held my breath as the dashboard loaded, my fingers resting still on the keyboard. The camera names popped up, grainy thumbnails showing empty rooms, until I backtracked the calendar to 3 days before my eviction. There she was. Callista. Walking through the front door like it was hers. Wearing my sweatshirt, sipping something from one of my mugs, she glanced toward the camera near the hallway, then walked straight past it. A minute later, Veronica entered behind her, holding a manila folder. I turned up the volume. Don't mess up the signatures, Callista whispered. Veronica replied, She doesn't even read these deeds. We'll switch the copy and have it notarized through that notary I trust. My stomach tightened. But not from surprise, from confirmation. Callista again. She's too soft. She'll shut down. And once it's in our name, she can't do a thing. Then Veronica, as casually as if she were asking for the remote. She owes us. This house is the least she can give after everything we gave up. I paused the video. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I stared at the screen like it was a courtroom, and I was both witness and prosecutor. I clicked download, backed up the file twice, once to an external drive, once to a secure cloud folder I labeled Evidence for attorney review. Then I kept digging. More footage showed them rifling through drawers, snapping photos of my tax statements, my design contracts, even a sealed envelope addressed to my business accountant. There was no hesitation, no guilt in their movements, just efficiency. They weren't victims. They were predators in pearls. I opened a spreadsheet and began logging timestamps, room entries, document titles. My heart didn't race. My breathing stayed even. I was past panic, past heartbreak. They weren't hurt. They were preparing to hurt. At some point, the sunlight shifted. I got up, stretched, made a bland cup of tea I barely sipped. Then I sat down again, opened one final clip. It showed Callista in my bedroom, standing near the bookshelf, adjusting the camera slightly. She leaned close to the lens, tilted her head, and smiled. She forgot we installed this, she said with a soft chuckle, like it was all just some harmless game. I stared at her frozen expression, that smug, curated confidence she carried like a handbag. I leaned back, let the silence wrap around me, and whispered, "No, Callista." I remembered exactly when I needed to. The footage didn't just show what they did, it showed who they really were. The chairs in Ms. Delgado's law office were firm in that intentionally uncomfortable way, just long enough to keep you alert, but not quite painful enough to complain. A framed certificate on the wall read, "Ethics matter more than winning," and the irony wasn't lost on me. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who didn't ask for context. She demanded proof, and I had brought it. Thumb drive, file folder, notes, timestamps. Every moment of betrayal cataloged without emotion. Delgado didn't flinch. She watched the footage I'd queued up, the clip of Callista smirking into the security camera, and gave a quiet, short exhale. "You're not dealing with family anymore," she said, not looking at me. "You're dealing with fraud." That was the shift, not some dramatic realization. Just 4 words said plainly by someone who saw through sentiment. I signed the cease and desist letter without hesitation. My hand didn't tremble. It was almost mechanical. By noon, her assistant had arranged courier service to hand-deliver the letter to the house. I didn't go with it. I didn't need to see their reactions in real time. I watched the courier's GPS pin instead, tracking it down the freeway like a guided missile. When it turned into their cul-de-sac, I closed the app. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Veronica. "How dare you? No greeting, no name. Just indignation dressed up as wounded pride." I didn't respond. I read it twice, deleted it, and set my phone face down. Sometimes drawing the line is the most loving thing you can do for someone who keeps stepping over it. Later that evening, I sat at Dana's kitchen table, opening my laptop again, intending to finally transfer the remainder of my savings to a new account. It was just a simple task, something concrete I could do while everything else felt like fog. But the screen blinked red. Transfer failed. I refreshed the page, checked the account again. Balance 0.00. I thought it was a glitch. I clicked again, checked the withdrawal history. 10 days ago, a full withdrawal. Cleared in person. ID verified. The name next to the signature line was one I knew too well. Gareth Ellis, my father. I stared at it for a long time. Not shocked, not furious. Just still. It wasn't just a house they wanted. It was everything I'd saved in silence. Every freelance job I'd taken. Every meal skipped to meet a deadline. Every time I said no to something for me, so I could say yes to them. Gone. Like it was owed to them. I didn't cry. I emailed Delgado the bank statement, the transaction log, and a photo of my old checkbook with both our names still printed at the top. I made a folder titled Joint Account Misuse and started compiling. Then I sent one final email. To myself. Subject, reminder. They took the money. Don't let them take your focus. At 9:40 p.m., I opened my messages again and hovered over the contact labeled Dad. My thumb paused on it. A part of me wondered if I just called and asked why. Maybe I'd understand. But I already knew. This wasn't confusion. This was strategy. Instead of calling, I opened a blank document. I titled it, Timeline of Exploitation, Exhibits AZ. Then I began to type. They emptied my account, but they're about to find out how deep I've kept my records. It was close to midnight when the email came through. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of Dana's guest house, my laptop balanced on a low coffee table, a mug of chamomile untouched beside me. The subject line read, Recorded Property Transfer, Scan Enclosed. I opened the attachment. My name sat there in smooth, practiced cursive, on a property deed that transferred legal rights of the house to Callista and Veronica. Dated and notarized. The signature looked neat, confident, official. Only one problem, it wasn't mine. Ms. Delgado had written in the body of the email, This was filed last week. The notary listed is Janine Trost. Ring a bell? Of course it did. Janine was a family friend, The kind of person who showed up to baby showers with passive-aggressive gifts and whispered gossip in the church hallway. I stared at the document, jaw clenched. Not from fear, from insult. They didn't just steal my house, they signed my name to my own erasure. Sleep became impossible after that. I left the guest house around 7 the next morning and drove to the church on 17th and Park. It was where my mother had started holding her Mother's Circle prayer sessions, an attempt to save face publicly by playing the devout victim. The parking lot was half full. I parked near the edge, pulled my hoodie low, and walked in through the side entrance. The sanctuary lights were dimmed. Women filled the pews, some clutching tissues, others whispering prayers into their sleeves. Veronica stood at the front, poised as always, wearing a powder blue cardigan and pearls like she was about to accept a community award. Her voice was soft, theatrical. "I didn't raise a monster," she said, the microphone amplifying her calm. "But maybe this world did. We don't know what poisons our children swallow from the internet, from success, from entitlement." Murmurs of sympathy spread through the room. A woman in the second row cried softly. Another nodded, mouthing, "Bless her heart." I sat in the last pew, half shielded by a column, watching the performance unfold. And it was a performance, crafted, rehearsed, strategically vulnerable. I waited until the event ended, when women were hugging and dispersing into the hallway with murmured prayers and plates of leftover cookies. Then I stepped outside and waited by the sidewalk. Veronica exited 10 minutes later, talking with one of the church ladies. When she saw me, she froze. Her friend glanced between us and, sensing the weight in the air, wisely walked away. I didn't raise my voice. "Which Jesus?" I asked evenly. "Signs over his child's house and calls it a blessing?" She blinked once, then again. Her lips pressed together. "We didn't think you'd notice," she said finally. Quiet but unflinching. I nodded slowly. "I notice everything now, especially the lies dressed as prayers." She looked like she wanted to respond, but couldn't find the right script. I took a folded copy of the forged deed from my bag and held it out. "This is a felony," I said. "Not a family dispute, not a misunderstanding. A felony." Her hands didn't move. "You have 48 hours," I said. "Retract every public statement. Apologize formally. Or I take this to court and let the headlines finish what you started." I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked away. And that moment, it didn't feel like a confrontation. It felt like filing paperwork, like updating an account setting. It felt like finishing a sentence someone else started for me, except now, I held the punctuation. That night, back in the guest house, I sat at the desk and began updating the file. Scanned documents, timestamps, audio clips. I recorded a voice memo and labeled it Operation Recovery, Phase 2. Into the mic, I spoke one sentence. "They taught me to never cause a scene. Now they're going to regret that. They used a fake signature to steal my life. I'll use the real law to take it back." Wednesday didn't feel like the middle of a week. It felt like the thickest part of a storm. No longer new, not yet over. I was sitting at the small dining table in the guest house, a half-eaten apple turning brown beside my laptop, when I got the message. "Check your sister's Instagram. You'll want to see what she posted." It came from Naomi, an old colleague from my first firm. We hadn't spoken in over a year. No emojis, no pleasantries. Just that one sentence. I opened the app and searched Callista's profile. Still set to public, of course. Her brand thrived on visibility. There it was, top of her grid. A reel titled, "Family Isn't Always Blood, But We Still Bleed." The video started with a slow-motion clip of our parents in the garden. Veronica gently pruning roses. Gareth in the background reading a book. So wholesome it bordered on satire. Then came the bedroom. My bedroom. The camera panned across the space from a low angle. Intimate. Intrusive. The footage was deliberately blurred, but unmistakable. My bookshelves. The framed photo of my college graduation. The throw blanket my aunt knitted before her arthritis made her stop. There was a soft piano track in the background. Callista's voice, airy and rehearsed. Sometimes, when the people closest to you forget their roots, the only thing you can do is bleed out your truth. I closed the app. Some people don't just rewrite history, they live stream the edited version. I pushed my chair back and walked to my duffel bag, pulled out the drive I'd been using to store backups, plugged it into the laptop, pulled up the archives. I hadn't looked at the bedroom cam footage in full. I'd been too focused on the living room, the paperwork, the conversations they didn't think I'd record. But now I had a gut feeling, and my gut hadn't failed me lately. It took less than 5 minutes to find what I didn't want to see but needed to know. Callista. Entering my room, not once, repeatedly, over days. Sometimes alone, sometimes on speakerphone, laughing, posing in front of my mirror. "She has no idea I'm here," she said in one clip, holding up a book from my nightstand. "She still thinks we're family." I watched her try on one of my coats, move a vase 2 inches to the left, swap a framed photo on my desk with a more flattering one of her and Mom from years ago. It wasn't random, it was a sequence. I started logging everything, every shift in placement, every object that went missing and reappeared, every time her fingers grazed something personal. This wasn't intrusion, it was identity theft. Piece by piece, she had staged the space for content, curated angles to serve her narrative of heartbreak and betrayal. My home became her set. My absence became her aesthetic. I printed screenshots, saved clips, labeled timestamps. The disbelief faded. In its place, order. By afternoon, I had drafted a cease and desist letter addressed directly to Callista. My lawyer would refine the language, but the bones were there. Alongside it, I submitted a digital takedown request to Instagram, citing copyright infringement, invasion of privacy, and misrepresentation. Quiet, legal, permanent. That was the brand of warfare they didn't expect me to master. At 6:12 p.m., just as I was finalizing my second evidence batch, my inbox pinged. No sender, no subject. One line of text in the body. "If you think that's all Callista did, you're not looking hard enough." Attached. A PDF file labeled Transfers of Trust PDF. My cursor hovered over the download icon. I wasn't just being watched, I was being replaced. I didn't open the attachment right away. The subject line was clean, almost sterile. Transfer of Trust PDF. No sender, no explanation. Just that file and a single line in the email body. "If you think that's all Callista did, you're not looking hard enough." I clicked. And what loaded wasn't just a forgery, it was a rewriting of reality. The document claimed that before my grandfather passed, I had transferred the home's ownership, my home, into a trust under Callista's name, filed at the county registrar 2 weeks ago, supposedly notarized, signed, and stamped. I read every word, then read it again. They didn't just rewrite the will, they rewrote my existence. By 9 a.m., I was standing in line at the registrar's office downtown, waiting my turn with a folder of neatly printed documents pressed tightly against my side. When it was finally my turn, I stepped to the counter and told the clerk I was there to verify ownership changes on a residential property. She typed, paused, clicked something on her screen, and then gave me a polite but pointed look. "You'll need to speak with someone from Property Transfer Review. Down the hall, room B14. In B14, I was greeted by a younger clerk, maybe in her 20s. She pulled up the record and turned the screen slightly toward me. Callista's name glared back. Filed electronically. Proxy attorney listed. My home address. A scanned signature that looked enough like mine to fool someone who never paid attention. But I had. The notary was one I'd never heard of. She never even tried to hide it. Just rewrote the paper trail and counted on silence to fill in the gaps. "They're not trying to steal the house," I whispered. "They're trying to erase the fact I ever owned it." Back at the guest house, I dropped my bag, opened my laptop, and started scanning Callista's social media. I wasn't looking for vanity this time. I was looking for weaponized narrative. And there it was. Her newest reel had already passed 18,000 likes. Background music swelled behind slow-motion clips of our parents, my mother arranging tulips in the kitchen, my father reading beside a sunlit window. Then came her voice. Some of us stay and sacrifice, some just run. The comments were nauseating. So inspiring. Your strength is everything. I wish my sister had your heart. And the audio? I froze the video and played it again, this time focusing only on the sound. It was me, my voice. A voicemail I'd left months ago, taken out of context, edited so that it sounded like I was yelling, angry, cold, unstable. The performance was seamless, the digital theater, immaculate. I could almost admire the craftsmanship. If it wasn't my life, they were dressing up for sale. I didn't flag the post, not yet. I opened a new folder on my desktop, Narrative versus Reality, and I started to upload screenshots, audio files, video clips, documents. I didn't need to argue anymore. I just needed to show them who was really telling the truth and who was just telling stories. I whispered to myself, I'm not deleting lies. I'm curating truth, patiently. At 4:37 p.m., another email arrived. This one from an address I didn't recognize. But the domain? A well-known law firm downtown. Subject line, defamation prep inquiry, media statement pending. I didn't open it right away, because it didn't feel like a question. It felt like a broadcast. They weren't just talking behind my back. They were building a broadcast. The forwarded email came late Thursday night, buried under a dozen subject lines that blurred together after hours of legal document scanning. But this one stood out. Town Hall Recognition Night. Honorees confirmed. I clicked. There they were, Veronica and Gareth Ellis. Community Family of the Year, nominated by Callista. Their faces smiled up at me from a digital flyer, glowing with soft backlighting and stock photo warmth. My name was nowhere. Even in the background of the family photos used, my face had been blurred out. Selective memory, made permanent with pixels. The event was set for Friday night, 7 o'clock. I didn't feel anger, not the fiery, chest-tightening kind. Just a sharpened resolve, like a scalpel gliding into flesh with precision. I marked the calendar. Friday arrived like a curtain call. I dressed plainly, dark blouse, hair pulled back. I didn't want attention. I wanted clarity. I wanted facts to speak louder than the lies people had been applauding all month. The community center was already full when I arrived. Rows of folding chairs, banners, tablecloths in pale blue and gold. I spotted Callista near the refreshment table, dressed like she belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. When her eyes met mine across the room, her smile faltered. Veronica and Gareth sat front and center. Both wore practiced expressions. Veronica scanned the room like a queen surveying her court. Gareth just looked tired. But that was his thing, looking tired while enabling chaos. I walked in alone, carrying only one slim folder. As the room dimmed for the evening's slideshow and tribute video, I slipped quietly toward the audio-visual booth. A young volunteer in a green staff vest looked up from the control board. I need you to play this instead, I said, holding out a flash drive. He hesitated. I'm invoking my legal rights. What's on there is public record, and if you play what they gave you, it's defamation by omission. I'm not asking, I'm informing. He nodded slowly and slotted the drive in. The mic at the front of the room hummed to life. If truth makes anyone uncomfortable, I said into it, voice steady, they're welcome to leave. The first clip lit the screen. Veronica and Callista, seated in my living room, laughing, flipping through mail that wasn't theirs. The audio was clear. She won't fight, Callista said. She's too passive. This'll all blow over. Let it, Veronica replied. We deserve something back for what we gave up. Gasps rippled through the room like dropped stones in water. Someone near the front shifted uncomfortably. A man stood up and quietly exited. A woman in the third row put a hand to her mouth. The footage rolled on. Callista in my bedroom, posing, touching things she had no business touching. Screenshots of the forged signature. Scanned copies of property documents. My voice narrating, brief, factual, clear. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't need to. But I saw it out of the corner of my eye. Veronica frozen, jaw tight. Gareth finally bowed his head. Whether in shame or just from the weight of exposure, I couldn't tell. When the screen went black, silence settled in. I stepped back up to the mic. No applause, no murmurs, just air thick with discomfort and reckoning. Now that we've seen who's really been left out, I said quietly, let's talk about what happens next. They built their stage on my silence. I just turned the mic on. Saturday morning arrived in a hush, the kind of quiet that doesn't soothe. It weighs. I hadn't slept much, but I was awake before the light fully crept through the windows. My inbox had already started to fill, but this time, it wasn't hate. The first subject line read, "I owe you an apology." The second, "I believed them. I was wrong." Each email was a small ripple, a shift. The tide was turning. I logged into the community forum for our neighborhood, mostly used for garage sales and lost cats. But the top post pinned was titled, "This woman scammed me. Don't trust her face or her brand." Attached were screenshots of a so-called investment opportunity Callista had pushed, a real estate flip that never happened. $20,000 vanished. The user, a woman named April, included every receipt, every message. Nothing doctored, nothing deniable. And just like that, the myth cracked. Sometimes a reputation falls faster than the truth can catch up to it. I refreshed the page. Comments poured in, some stunned, others vindicated. Then came a message from a podcast host. "We'd love to have you on to tell your side. No edits, just truth." By noon, Callista's follower count was dropping in real time. Major sponsors had gone quiet. "Influencer partnerships under review," one headline read. It wasn't vengeance that filled me. It was fatigue. Heavy, old, familiar. Around 3 p.m., there was a knock at the door of the guest house. I opened it to find Aunt Marla holding a large manila envelope, her face drawn but calm. "I believed her too," she said, until she turned on me. She stepped inside, sat down, and opened the envelope. "I defended you at dinner," she continued, "told them enough was enough, that whatever this circus was, they needed to stop. Veronica told me I'd betrayed the family. Gareth just looked away." Inside the envelope was a copy of our grandmother's original will. No edits, no trust transfers. My name, written in her shaky but unmistakable handwriting, stood as sole heir to the house. "She wanted you to have it," Marla said softly. "That was never in question." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt still. They tried to sell what wasn't even theirs to dream about. I added the document to my legal folder. Labeled it Exhibit Q, Intentional Inheritance Manipulation. "You gave them a mirror," Marla said as she stood to leave. "The fact they shattered it isn't your fault." That night, the quiet was different. At 9:17 p.m., I received an alert from Ms. Delgado. The subject line read, "Settlement offer, confidential terms." I opened the document, scanned the first few lines, verbiage about non-disclosure, property rights, mutual silence. Then I closed it. They finally believe I'm serious, but now they'll see what I look like when I'm silent. By choice. Sunday began with a cup of coffee and the kind of silence that feels earned. Not heavy like grief, not sharp like anger. Just spacious. A pause between storms. I hadn't planned to watch it, but when Dana forwarded me the link with just the words, "You'll want to see this," I clicked. It was a local talk show, pre-recorded, polished, easy for background noise. But today's promo headline blazed across the screen like a dare. "Family Betrayal, One Couple's Story of Survival." There they were, Veronica and Gareth, seated on the studio set, stage lighting softening the edges of their rehearsed pain. My mother wore a dove gray blazer, her pearls steady. Gareth nodded when prompted, his eyes downcast just enough to suggest humility. I just keep asking, Veronica said, what we did to deserve this. We gave her everything we had. And in return, she gave us silence. In the comment section below the stream, someone tagged my name. Another replied, check Reddit before you judge. The host, to her credit, didn't let it slide. We obtained documents you may not have expected us to see, she said after a commercial break, and a timeline that complicates this version of events. And then, clips. Footage. The same material I'd presented at the town hall, but now reframed for a broader audience. No music, no edits, just truth. Callista was notably absent. Veronica shifted in her seat. That's been taken out of context. Gareth stammered something about misunderstandings, but it barely registered. The audience didn't gasp, they didn't boo. But the silence afterward was louder than any applause. Later that afternoon, while checking my messages, I got a link from Mrs. Calloway, our elderly neighbor from 3 doors down. She had posted publicly to her local community forum. I watched that girl mow her parents' lawn every Saturday at age 29, she wrote, while they sat on the porch and bragged about how much money she made. Don't let polished stories fool you. Then came others. Quiet, small anecdotes. Nothing dramatic. Just truth, spoken plainly. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The collective memory of a neighborhood had become my witness stand. By evening, Delgado sent me a scanned letter, a formal settlement offer from Veronica's attorney. It was neat, cleanly typed, a list of conditions, most of them predictable. I'd drop all public statements, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and in return, they'd retract their posts, release any remaining claims to the house, and pay a modest sum. I printed the offer, filed it into a folder labeled Options I Already Outgrew. I didn't need the win in court anymore. That part of me, the one who wanted to prove something, had gone quiet. I had already claimed something bigger than legal ground. I had reclaimed the narrative. Just after sunset, as the orange haze dipped behind the rooftops, my phone lit up with a restricted number. The voicemail came through. No intro, no apology. Callista's voice. I'm not calling to fight, she said. I'm just asking. What would it take to end this? I hit replay, listened again. Then I deleted it. She asked what it would take to end this. I was just starting to learn what it meant to begin again. I played the voicemail again. Callista's voice came through, lower than usual, missing its usual varnish. What would it take to end this? She'd asked. The message was less than 10 seconds long, but I let it play twice. Then I tossed my phone on the couch and turned back to the office plants. A fiddle leaf fig had begun curling at the tips. Too much sun from the window. I turned the pot slightly, rotated it, added a splash of water. Not because I expected anything to grow overnight, but because something about tending to something that couldn't speak back was soothing in a way family had never been. What would it take to end this? For me, it already had. By early afternoon, I took a short walk down to the cafe near the boardwalk. I didn't order anything fancy, just a black coffee and a spot near the window. As I sipped, I thought about all the versions of myself I'd let die to make others comfortable. The daughter who never asked questions. The sister who gave more than she had. The woman who thought silence was strength when, really, it was just another form of control. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through headlines again. The talk show clips were still circulating, but the pace of reposts had slowed. The shock was over. The narrative had landed. And people, finally, were seeing through the varnish. It cost me more than I'd ever admit to get here. Friends who didn't return calls. Clients who waited until the public shifted before offering apologies. Entire stretches of my identity now redefined not by me, but by who stood beside me when the truth got uncomfortable. When someone shows you who they are, I whispered, quoting Maya Angelou, "Believe them the first time." That evening, back at the guest house, I sat with a notepad, intending to draft a reply to Callista. Nothing elaborate, just a clear answer to her question. But I didn't. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote a different list. Not of things I'd say, but things I'd never say again. "I'm sorry for upsetting you. I know you didn't mean to. I'll let it go. For peace." I drew a line through each one. That kind of peace had a price, and I wasn't offering discounts anymore. Dinner with Marla that night was quiet. We met at a small Mediterranean place she liked. No tablecloths, just sturdy chairs and strong tea. She talked about how she'd moved her photos out of Veronica's house, about how she stopped calling on Sundays. "I thought I could fix them," she said, dipping a piece of pita into hummus. "Now I just fix my life." I nodded, smiling. "Same." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Not for comfort, but in recognition. A passing of something older than apology. Later, as the sky darkened, I took a walk alone along Ocean Beach. No headphones, no agenda. Just me and the waves and the sound of something inside finally still. I stood near the shoreline, watching how the water erased footprints, no matter who made them. "Letting go doesn't mean I lost," I said out loud, soft enough only I could hear it. "It means I stopped bleeding for people who kept stabbing." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I didn't answer. This time, silence isn't survival. It's power. The last appointment at Delgado's office felt more like a ceremony than a meeting. No conversation about next steps, no long explanations, just action. A final cease and desist package, a permanent property claim, a restraining order drafted and ready for court filing. I signed everything with a steady hand. "I want them served by the end of the day," I said. Delgado glanced up from the papers. "You're not hesitating anymore." "No," I replied. "Let's finish this." By early afternoon, I was sitting in my car outside their old house, the house that once held every version of me, now just a faded backdrop to their performance. I called. Veronica answered after 3 rings. "Isleen!" "I'm not calling to talk," I said, firm. "This is legal notice. I'm reading it aloud as a courtesy." I read every line, every clause, every enforcement deadline. She tried to interrupt, once, twice, but I didn't stop. Gareth never got on the line. I imagined him sitting beside her, the same silence he always wore like armor. When I finished, I waited one breath, then said, "You used to say silence was cruelty. You were right, and this silence, what follows, is my mercy." I hung up. 2 hours later, Aunt Marla came by with an envelope, yellowed, carefully resealed. A handwritten letter from my grandmother. It had been tucked away in one of her jewelry boxes, meant for me after she passed. But somehow, it never reached me until now. I opened it slowly, hands steady even when my throat wasn't. "My Isleen," she wrote. "I know this family can twist its own roots. They will try to inherit what they never built. Don't let them. You are the legacy, not the property." She didn't talk about money or deeds. She talked about me, my voice, my work, my steadiness. I held the letter to my chest, not crying, but rooted. The next morning, I drove to the house one last time. The keys no longer meant anything. I stood on the front lawn, holding a for sale sign in one hand and a small hammer in the other. I pounded the stake into the ground myself. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Some waved. I didn't wave back. I didn't need to. "This house isn't my justice," I whispered. "I am." By sunset, I was unpacking boxes in my new cottage in Oceanside. Smaller, quieter, all mine. I placed a single photo on the mantel. Me on a solo trip to Joshua Tree. No one else in the frame. Then I set the letter from Grandma next to it, inside a glass frame. Outside, the waves rolled in slow, steady. The world didn't celebrate my win, but I didn't need fireworks. I needed breath. They told the world I abandoned them. What I really did was rescue myself.